Hi, Maurice here again, and I just wanted to quickly go over external instruments and outboard gear and their connections in Logic Pro, how to use them. All right, so what you'll see in front of you is just a MIDI track, and that's going to be the source MIDI data for that top device you see there, which is an old Sound Canvas 88 Pro. When I press play in Logic, you'll hear the results of that data being sent out to that device and being returned via this input on my Apollo. So this is going out to that MIDI port on that MIDI device, which is a MIDI interface. This is an old device, so it uses 5-pin, not USB, but your connection and selection would be the same. If it was a USB connected device like that MIDI 218, and I select the channel that I'm sending to that device, and I select the return of the output of the device to the input of the Apollo. Not that complicated. When I press play, you hear the synth. All right, so I wanted to demonstrate a second way of doing that same thing. And the reason I wanted to demonstrate that is because when you're finished editing that MIDI data and you're ready to finish the song, it's likely that you'll want to record the audio from that synth or external keyboard or external MIDI device to an audio track. And to do that, you'll either need to create an audio track, as I did here, or do what I usually do, which is not use the external MIDI plugin at all. I'll just use a MIDI track and have a live audio track associated with it right next to it. So I can record the MIDI data, and when I finish editing, I just press record on this track, and that audio data is recorded. This audio track, which is the result of the synth's MIDI data. And so it's ready to be processed in any way and prepared for mix. So I have the original MIDI data that I can keep forever. And now I have a recording of that audio from that synth that I can edit, EQ, compress within Logic and prepare for mix. And I do that because eventually I'm always going to need an audio track anyway. Next thing I wanted to show you here today is output gear and routing it via the I/O plugin. That bass sound you're hearing from the synth. Say I wanted to compress it using this bottom device, which is an old 1066 compressor from DBX. I'm using the I/O plugin in Logic, which is located in the utilities. And I'm routing out data, audio in this case, from one of the line outputs on my interface and returning it to a line input. I hit ping, which will detect any delay and compensate for it, and offset as needed to make sure that the returning audio will be effectively at the same position and time as the audio data sent out of the device. So the audio data that returns won't have a huge delay that doesn't fit with the song anymore. All right, so in this case, what you're hearing now is the returned print of that audio. So this dry signal of the synth that was recorded earlier is being sent out of line 6, output 8, and returned on input 4. All right, but what I want to show you is it's similar to the recording of MIDI data. Eventually, you're going to want to print that. And in order to do so, you're going to have to create another track. You can't bounce this data. You can't use the control bounce to create an audio print of this data. You're going to have to process it. And to do that, I use another track with another input. And I just set it for that same line input and press record. And so we have the processed signal in this case, a compressed signal of that same synth. And the reason for that is because I want to have that processed synth ready to mix if I disconnect both the synth and the compressor later. So I always record that to a track so that that processed, finished audio is ready to be mixed as necessary as part of the larger song. That's basically it. The connections will vary, so I'm not going to really get deep into the connections. But usually that's where things go wrong for most users, both in case of the MIDI connections and routing, and in case of any audio gear. Really look carefully over the routing of audio out of your system, MIDI out of your system, and audio returning to your system via the MIDI device or via the processor you're using. That's what I wanted to show you. I hope this really helps. I know it's kind of complicated if you're new to this, but it really isn't. It takes a little bit of practice to get used to, but I hope it'll help. Have a good one.